Hey everyone, welcome back. Hope you're having a fantastic day so far. So back on September 30th, the Social Security made a big change that impacted thousands of Social Security recipients. And it seems like every single month or even every single week, lawmakers in Washington are advocating for new changes to Social Security, or we have new changes taking place. In today's video, we're going to be covering a few more changes that could be on the horizon for Social Security, impacting millions of beneficiaries. But before we go ahead and dive into for today, if you would like to receive up to $200 in free stock or $200 in free cash, in a pinned comment below, I will be leaving a link to Robinhood. All you have to do is once you click on that link is just sign up for a free account and then simply link your bank account. You do not even have to make an opening deposit. At that point in time, Robinhood will be sending you one free stock worth all the way up to $200. And if you'd rather just have the cash, all you have to do is once you receive the free stock is just sell it for what it's worth and then transfer the cash value right back to your bank account. Okay, so diving right into it for today. So just a few days ago, back on September 30th, we had a big new change taking place within Social Security that impacted thousands of beneficiaries. That change, of course, according to Social Security Matters, was switching over from direct checks to only being able to receive payments via electronic payments or on a direct express card. This impacted less than 1% of total beneficiaries of Social Security who were still receiving a paper check in the mail. But now, starting as of September 30th, you now have to receive your Social Security check in your bank account or on a direct express card. Now, of course, we have more changes perhaps on the horizon. So for example, coming up on October 15th, we are going to have the Social Security cost of living adjustment announcement. If the government reopens at that point in time, if it does not, perhaps it is going to be delayed. But right now in DC, we have other lawmakers advocating for big new changes to Social Security. So in today's video, we are going to be covering what some of those changes are. So the first one, according to Truthout, it's coming mostly from the Republican side of the aisle. Some of them want to raise the full retirement age to 70. So once again, according to Truthout, in a time when life expectancy in the United States is declining for the first time in decades, and Americans can expect on average to enjoy even fewer years of retirement, Republicans are considering a radical plan to shrink the retirement window. House Republicans have been working out the details of their deeply unpopular plan to cut Social Security and Medicare in order to deepen poverty and shackle people to the labor force further into old age. The party is considering a proposal to raise the retirement age for Social Security to 70 per the Washington Post, which means that workers and retirees would have to work an additional 3 to 4 years to receive full benefits. This proposal would mostly affect younger workers who have not yet started to receive benefits from the program. Now, under this proposal, Americans could expect to be able to enjoy retirement for only about 6 years if the most recent life expectancy estimates hold. In 2021, the average life expectancy in the U.S. dropped to 76 years and 1 month. So obviously, once again, this proposal is very much deeply unpopular. This is a proposal mostly held by Republicans, although not all Republicans hold this idea. So for example, the sitting current president of the United States, and Donald Trump, said that he is firmly against the idea of raising the full retirement age, and he's also against cutting benefits. So even if they were to pass a bill onto his desk to raise the retirement age, at least according to him, this is a bill that he would veto and he would not allow to pass. So we will have to wait and see what happens with that. Now, another idea floating around in Congress right now has to do with the cost of living adjustments and making sure that in future years, the cost of living adjustments are actually higher and that they either keep up with inflation or even surpass inflation. So according to Think Advisor, Senator Bob Casey, chairman of the Senate Special Committee on Aging, has introduced new legislation, the Boosting Benefits in COLAs for Seniors Act, that would direct the Social Security Administration to adjust benefits based on the Consumer Price Index for Americans 62 years of age and older over to the CPIE. The change to the cost of living adjustment calculations, which currently uses the Consumer Price Index for urban wage earners and clerical workers, or CPIW for short, is intended to better reflect the costs that older adults face, but a look at previous COLAs showed that the senior focus index would not have always resulted in higher benefits. So in this bill, basically they'd be switching the method in which they calculate the cost of living adjustments from the CPIW over to the CPIE. Now in most years, the CPIE, at least on average, is a little bit higher than the CPIW. However, as they also mentioned there, in some years the CPIW is actually higher than the CPIE. So this bill could potentially backfire in certain years where you would actually be receiving a lower cost of living adjustment. That is why we have the Senior Citizens League actually advocating for what they call the CPI best, or the best CPIE, best CPI. So they would essentially be taking the CPIW, they would be taking the CPIE, and whichever these two are higher, they would be using whichever one of these was higher. And then they'd also be taking a number like 3%. So if the CPIW came in at lower than the 3% number, and the CPIE came in at lower than 3%, then we would actually have a guaranteed minimum of 3% for the cost of living adjustment. So even in years where there is no inflation taking place whatsoever, it's a 0% inflation, there would still be a cost of living adjustment of 3%. So as you can see up on the screen, TSCL believes that just switching the COLA calculations to use the CPIE doesn't go far enough. Instead, we calculate that the government uses what we call the CPI best to calculate the COLA, and you can see up on the screen, dating all the way back to 2016, what using the CPI best would have done for Social Security. So you can see, for example, back in 2016, the CPIW was 0%. The CPIE was 0.6%, which was better than the CPIW. However, the CPI best would have been the highest at 3%. So back in 2016, for example, the cost of living adjustment would have been 3%, rather than not receiving any type of cost of living adjustment at all. Now, another change being talked about in Washington right now has to do with SSI benefits and the asset limits. So right now, the asset limits for individuals is just $2,000. For couples, it's $3,000. If you go over that amount, you risk having your SSI completely taken away. $2,000 for individuals and $3,000 for couples is just not that much money in 2025, especially considering the fact that whenever they first made these asset limits several decades ago, they have never been adjusted for inflation for whatever reason. So in a new bill, they would actually increase these asset limits, and they would also attach them to inflation. So they would be moving up pretty much every single year. So according to the Financial Regulation News, bipartisan legislation recently introduced in the U.S. Senate would reform the Supplemental Security Income Program for the first time in 40 years. The SSI Savings Penalty Elimination Act would raise the SSI asset limits to $10,000 for individuals and $20,000 for married couples. The limits would be indexed to inflation moving forward. Under current limits, the individuals with a disability or those 65 and older are only eligible for SSI if they have under $2,000 in assets. The limit is just $3,000 for married couples. So again, this would really help out people receiving SSI. Of course, moving up those asset limits, making it so they're not going to be at risk of losing their SSI benefits if they eclipse the very low standard, which right now is $2,000 for individuals and $3,000 for married couples. And then finally, one other thing currently being discussed in DC has to do with disability benefits. So according to the Washington Post, the Trump administration is preparing a plan that will make it harder for older Americans to qualify for Social Security disability payments, part of an overhaul of the federal safety net for poor, older, and disabled people that could result in hundreds of thousands of people losing benefits, according to people familiar with the plans. Currently, the Social Security Administration evaluates disability claims by considering age, work experience, and education to determine if a person can adjust to other types of work. Older applicants, typically over 50, have a better chance of qualifying because age is treated as a limitation in adapting to many jobs. But now, officials are considering eliminating age as a factor entirely or raising the threshold to age 60, according to 3 people familiar with the plans who spoke on the Condition pretty much of being anonymous to share private discussions. They also plan to modernize labor market data to judge whether claimants can work, replacing an outdated jobs database that includes obsolete occupations like net sorters and telephone quotation clerks, following a Washington Post investigation back in 2022. So once again, those are possible changes on the horizon. They are not yet official, but they are being discussed in DC. With that said, leave your thoughts and comments below. Which of these changes would you support and which of these changes would you not support? Leave your thoughts and comments below, but that's all we have for today's video, and I will see you in the next one.